Imagine you are sitting in a cafe, scrolling through your phone, and a little ad pops up for something you were just talking about with a friend yesterday. It feels a little spooky, right? You probably recognize that stubborn feeling of being right, that immediate thought of, oh, it is just a coincidence. My phone is not actually listening. We have all been there. It is a comfortable thought, one that lets us go back to our latte without a second worry. But what if that instinct to dismiss it, to cling to the familiar idea that we are just being paranoid, is the very thing that keeps us from seeing a much larger and more important picture? This is where the story of Edward Snowden comes in, not as some distant political figure, but as a guy who tried to explain something vital to all of us. His core idea is actually pretty simple when you strip away all the technical jargon. It is this massive silent system of surveillance has been built around us, and it does not just watch criminals, it watches everyone. It collects our emails, our texts, our search histories, our locations, building a permanent record of our private lives. And the real danger is not that some agent is personally reading your texts about what to make for dinner. The danger is that the very existence of this system, this ability to know everything about anyone, changes the nature of power itself. It creates a society where people might start to hesitate before they search for something controversial, or before they attend a protest, or before they criticize the government. It is the chilling effect of being watched. And it's a new form of tyranny because it is so quiet and invisible. As Snowden himself put it, arguing that you do not care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you do not care about free speech because you have nothing to say. Now think about that for a second. Remember when you were a kid and you realized a belief you held, maybe about Santa Claus or something else, was not quite true. There was that moment of cognitive dissonance, a tension between what you felt was right and what the evidence was showing you. We all experience this natural tension every day. Our instinctive fast thinking wants to protect us. It wants to say, everything is fine. Do not rock the boat. These big, complicated issues are for other people to worry about. It is the same part of us that gets a weird ad and quickly explains it away. It is easier, it is more comfortable, but then there is a slower, deeper awareness. The one that sits with an idea and really turns it over. This is the part of us that Snowden's story appeals to. It is the part that feels a genuine unease when we really stop to consider the scale of what he revealed. Many of us cling to familiar ideas because the alternative feels overwhelming. Or worse, it makes us feel powerless. What could I possibly do about it? This is how we fool ourselves into acceptance. We trade our long-term freedom for short-term convenience, and we use our fast thinking to justify the trade. Snowden's principles gently reveal this self-deception we all practice. He showed us that the tools we use for convenience are the very tools of this new surveillance. Our phones, our apps, our social networks, they are the doorway, and we welcome them in because they made life easier and more connected. The problem was never the technology itself, but who controls it and how it is used against us without our genuine, informed consent. This is not about having something to hide. It is about having something to protect, the very right to have a private thought, a private conversation, a private life, without it being logged into a permanent database. It is about the freedom to be wrong, to be curious, to explore ideas without being judged by an unblinking digital eye. Understanding this is the first step. It is moving from that instinctive dismissal to a deeper awareness of the world being built around us, often without our vote or our voice. It is realizing that privacy is not secrecy. It is the foundation of a free and open society where people can be themselves. This cracks open the entire conversation about our digital lives and the quiet, creeping nature of modern control. We start by seeing things in a very simple binary way. Something is either private or it is not. An action is either good or it is bad. In this initial phase, our reactions are almost instinctual, driven by a desire for safety and simplicity. We might think, if I have nothing to hide, I have nothing to fear. This is the comfortable starting point, where the world feels orderly and the trade-offs seem clear and manageable. We grant permissions to apps without a second thought. We welcome convenience, and we trust that the systems in place are inherently just, designed for our protection and benefit. It is a place of unexamined trust, where complexity is hidden behind friendly interfaces and simple terms of service. But then, inevitably, we enter the confusing middle. This is the phase where the simple story begins to fray at the edges and things become profoundly complicated. This is the moment Edward Snowden jolted so many into, a disorienting space where the old rules no longer seem to apply. You might be someone who resists change at first, clinging to that initial, simpler understanding, because the new reality is so unsettling. Most of us feel uneasy during transitions, and this is a massive one. Snowden's view was that the primary challenge isn't just the act of surveillance itself, but the immense difficulty of even perceiving it. It is a system designed to be invisible, to operate in the shadows of our digital exhaust. We feel a vague sense of unease, but can't quite pinpoint why. We hear arguments from both sides, national security versus personal liberty, and the complexity can feel paralyzing. It is no longer about good versus evil, but about competing goods and uncertain risks. This is the tough part, the messy middle where we are forced to sit with discomfort and ambiguity, where the easy answers evaporate. It is in this murky confusion that we can see the stark contrast Snowden highlighted between a knee-jerk reaction and a thoughtful response. The knee-jerk reaction is to dismiss the concern as paranoia, or to blindly accept authorities' word that it is all for our own good. It is the path of least resistance. The thoughtful response, however, is to lean into the discomfort, to ask harder questions, and to demand transparency and accountability. It is to recognize that a system of mass surveillance, by its very architecture, cannot discriminate between a threat and an ordinary citizen. This is where the journey transforms. You may catch yourself pausing before reacting lately, before clicking agree on a new privacy policy, or before sharing a piece of your digital identity. That pause is the beginning of the new clarity. This new clarity is not about finding another simple answer to replace the first one. It is a more mature, nuanced understanding. We start noticing the small ways our autonomy is subtly shaped, not by a mustache-twirling villain, but by a vast, impersonal system of data collection and analysis. We begin to understand that privacy is not about hiding a wrong, but about protecting the right to have a personal life, to think freely without judgment, and to associate with whom we choose without creating a permanent record. The new clarity reveals that the real tyranny is not the dramatic seizure of rights, but the quiet, incremental erosion of them. It is the realization that a society where everyone feels watched is a society that slowly stops taking creative risks, stops exploring controversial ideas, and begins to self-censor. We see that the goal is not to have something to hide, but to have something to protect, the very essence of our individual humanity. This is the legacy of the cypherpunk philosophy Snowden embodies, moving us from passive subjects to active, engaged citizens of the digital world, equipped with a sober understanding of power and a renewed commitment to guarding our own freedoms. Through this discomfort, we begin to notice something subtle shifting within us. It's not a loud, dramatic change, but a quiet recalibration of our internal compass. The things that used to trigger an immediate, heated reaction now seem to land with a softer impact. We might find ourselves pausing before we speak in a tense conversation, or taking a deep breath when a plan goes awry, responding from a place of consideration rather than pure, unfiltered reaction. This space, however small it feels at first, is where our new understanding starts to take root and grow. It is the fertile ground where we can finally plant the seeds of the person we are trying to become, rather than just endlessly pruning the person we were told to be. Synonym. This process is deeply personal, yet it connects us to a universal human experience. We start to see that much of our previous frustration came from trying to fit ourselves into molds that were never designed for our unique shapes. We were following scripts written by others, adhering to rules that serve systems rather than people. Letting go of that feels vulnerable, even scary, because we're stepping away from the known, even if the known was uncomfortable. But in that vulnerability lies our greatest strength. It is the courage to be imperfect, to be a work in progress, to acknowledge that we are learning as we go. This is not a sign of failure, but the very essence of being alive and engaged with our own existence. You'll likely find daily decisions coming easier, not because life gets simpler, but because your internal noise begins to quiet down. The constant background hum of shoulds and what-ifs starts to fade, replaced by a clearer, more intuitive signal. That nagging feeling of being perpetually behind or not quite good enough begins to lose its power over you. It's like you've been trying to listen to a distant radio station through a storm of static, and someone finally, gently, adjusted the dial. The message was always there, but now you can hear it. You begin to trust that inner voice more, the one that knows what you need for your own well-being, not just what will please the crowd or meet some external standard. Many notice old frustrations don't bother them as much. The long line at the grocery store, the sudden rainstorm, the misplaced keys. These minor irritations, which once felt like personal affronts designed to ruin your day, begin to regain their true proportion. They are simply events, not verdicts on your life or character. This shift happens because your sense of self is becoming less tied to external circumstances and more anchored in a stable internal foundation. You are no longer a pinball, bouncing wildly from one bumper of misfortune to the next. You become the player, aware of the game, but not defined by every tilt and jolt. This doesn't mean you become passive. Far from it. You conserve the energy you once spent on frustration and redirect it toward what truly matters. This journey inward inevitably leads us outward again, back to our relationships and our place in the world. But we return changed. We engage with others not from a place of neediness or a desire for validation, but from a sense of genuine connection and curiosity. We become better listeners because we are no longer just waiting for our turn to talk, to prove our point, or to secure our position. We can hear the spaces between words. We can appreciate a perspective different from our own without feeling threatened. Our conversations become less about debate and more about discovery, a shared exploration of the human experience rather than a battle of right versus wrong. This newfound clarity also allows us to extend a much deeper compassion, not only to others, but crucially, to ourselves. We understand that everyone is fighting their own hidden battles, wrestling with their own versions of discomfort and fear. We see the shared humanity in the stranger's eyes. We become quicker to forgive the small slights because we recognize they often stem from a place of pain we cannot see. And we learn, perhaps for the first time, to offer that same forgiveness to ourselves for our own stumbles and imperfections. We release the exhausting pursuit of an idealized, flawless self and embrace the beautifully messy, constantly evolving reality of who we are. As we continue on this path, the world itself seems to change its texture. Colors might feel a bit brighter, moments of quiet contentment a bit more frequent. This isn't because the world itself has transformed, but because the lens through which we view it has been cleaned of old fears and distortions. We become more present, more available to the simple joys that were always there. The warmth of sunlight on skin, the sound of genuine laughter, the comfort of a shared silence. We start to collect these moments like treasures, understanding that this is the real wealth of a life well lived, not the trophies on a shelf or the accolades on a resume. This entire process, from the first prickles of discomfort to the dawning of a quieter, more assured way of being, is about reclaiming authorship of our own story. For so long, we may have felt like characters in a narrative written by our parents, our culture, our job, or our social circle. Now we gently take the pen into our own hands. We don't need to scribble out the previous chapters in anger. We can acknowledge them as the necessary path that led us here. But from this point forward, we choose the words. We decide the plot twists. We define what a happy ending looks like for us. Together, we discover that the most profound transformations are not announced with fanfare, but are felt in the quietest moments of our days. It is in the deep breath we take instead of lashing out, the boundary we set with love, the risk we take on our own behalf, the choice to rest when the world says achieve. It is built one small, courageous yes to ourselves and one gentle no to what drains us at a time. This is how we build a life that feels authentically ours, not a performance for an invisible audience. And in doing so, we arrive at a sense of liberation that is both profound and deeply personal. It brings to mind Edward Snowden's key insight about the nature of true freedom, which he described not as a grand political concept, but as a tangible physical sensation of relief and rightness, like finally taking off shoes that never quite fit. For so long, we've been walking through our lives in shoes that were too tight, that pinched and blistered our souls, convincing ourselves that this was just how walking was supposed to feel. We didn't know there was another way, but now, having untied those laces and slipped them off, we feel the solid ground beneath our feet for the first time. We can wiggle our toes. We can feel the grass. We can finally walk in the direction of our own choosing, at our own pace, unburdened and free, ready to explore the vast, beautiful landscape of a life that is truly our own.